is midnight in Washington, 5 in London, and 2 on a Tuesday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gan-young. Let's get a check of the main stories we're following at this hour. Pouring gasoline on the fire, Korea-Japan relations are about to get even worse as Tokyo has set out a new school textbook guidelines that include claims to Korea's easternmost Dokdo Island. The Park administration issued special pardons ahead of the Lunar New Year holiday to nearly 6,000 people who were convicted trying to make ends meet in its first set of pardons since it came into office last February. And Asian shares are pinned in near 5-month lows on this Tuesday as turmoil in emerging markets and concerns about an economic slowdown in China take their toll. Its possible impact on the Korean economy, we take an in-depth look. Now, we'll have those stories and more, but first, amid seemingly thawing relations between the two Koreas, South Korea Monday proposed holding a fresh round of reunions for families separated since the Korean War in the third week of February. Now, Seoul also suggested holding working-level talks Wednesday, tomorrow that is, to fine-tune the details of the event. So do we have a response from the North yet? For that, let's go live to our correspondent Hwang Sung-hee at the Unification Ministry. Sung-hee?
Kanyang, there has been no response from North Korea yet, although many are expecting an answer from the North sometime today, at least on Seoul's offer for working-level talks, which may or may not take place tomorrow at the North Korean side of the tourist village of Panmunjom, depending on the North. Now, experts say that North Korea will come under heavy criticism if it rejects the proposal, because it was the one to make the sudden proposal to resume family reunions last week. But there is also the possibility of the North making a counter-proposal on the date of the reunion. Now, the date that Seoul proposed is from February 17th to the 22nd, which is right before it begins its annual joint military drills with Washington. Experts say that North Korea may ask to schedule the reunions so that the reunions take place during the military exercise period to pressure Seoul to either call off the drills or to scale it down. Kanyang?
Now, Sung-hee, we are also hearing that North Korea actually called on the South to stop a West Sea naval exercise scheduled for this afternoon.
That's right, Kanyang. Seoul's Defense Ministry said today that Pyongyang, through a military hotline on the western sea border, demanded that Seoul stop its naval exercise, threatening severe consequences if it continues as planned. The ministry said it sent a reply shortly thereafter, saying it's a regular exercise and adding its hope that the exercise will not affect the possible plans for resuming family reunions. The ministry says it notified the North of the exercise on Sunday. Now, this is in line with the South Korean government's stance that humanitarian issues such as the resumption of family reunions will be dealt separately from such military drills. Kanyang?
All right, thanks, Sung-hee, for that. That was our Hwang Sung-hee reporting on Seoul's proposal to hold family reunions next month from Seoul's Unification Ministry. Now, South Korea has launched a trial run of a new border entry system that it hopes will facilitate transport for workers at the inter-Korean Kaeseong Industrial Complex. The Unification Ministry said a number of South Korean workers enter the complex this Tuesday morning using the new system. The new radio frequency identification system will enable South Korean workers to travel in and out of the complex at any time on days that they have received permission to cross the border instead of having to cross at a designated time. Well, the government expects it will also reduce the time it takes to cross by roughly 12 minutes for a total crossing time of 5 minutes. The system will be fully implemented after the 2-week trial if there are no problems and following additional consultations with North Korea. Now, the Japanese government has made fresh territorial claims to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island. Tokyo's move to revise school textbooks and teaching manuals with the false claims deals yet another blow to the extremely sour ties between the two countries. Our Oh Jin-ju has this report.
How much worse can Korea-Japan relations get? The Japanese government has decided to define the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island and the disputed island chain in the East China Sea as its own territory in a manual on government guidelines for teachers and middle and high school textbooks. With regard to Dokdo, the manual includes a statement that Korea is, quote, illegally occupying Takeshima, which is what Japan calls the islets, and, quote, the Japanese government is protesting against such action. On the East China Sea Islands, Tokyo says it is, quote, effectually controlling the island chain and there is no territorial disputes to resolve. Japanese Education Minister Hakubun Shimomura said it is natural for a country to properly teach its inherent territory. The manual contains government guidelines for teaching and has a major influence over the textbook screening process, as there is a regulation forcing all textbooks to follow the manual. Japan usually revises the guidelines and its manual every 10 years, and the next revision was supposed to take place in 2016. But Kyodo News reports that it is unprecedented for the Japanese government to make such changes earlier than scheduled. In 2008, the Japanese government had included a statement in its manual that, quote, there's a difference in opinion between Korea and Japan on the Dokdo Island, and that there needs to be efforts to strengthen their understanding on the territory. Even then, when Japan didn't say Dokdo was Japanese territory, the two nations' ties were under great strain. But now with Japan putting it in such strong words, it's hard to predict where Korea-Japan relations can go from here. Seoul's foreign ministry is expected to summon the Japanese ambassador to Korea later on this Tuesday to strongly protest Tokyo's move. Oh Jin-ju, ARIRANG News.
Now, with tensions in Northeast Asia rising over Japan's refusal to acknowledge its wartime atrocities, something on the opposite end is happening across the globe. Germany, Poland, and other countries around the world held ceremonies to remember the victims of the Holocaust and ensure that such horrors are never repeated. Son Jung-in reports.
Germany's parliament held its annual ceremony to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day on Monday, with government representatives and guests from other nations. The sound of a string quartet resonated inside the hall where the ceremony took place, while Holocaust survivors laid wreaths and flowers to honor the victims of the genocide. Monday's commemorations come 69 years after Soviet soldiers swept into Auschwitz, the former death camp in Poland, to liberate the roughly 7,000 people still interned there. German lawmakers expressed their sympathy for the survivors who are still suffering in the aftermath of the war.
Never should anyone be discriminated against or threatened by differences in political beliefs, religion, or gender. Germany no longer acknowledges prejudice against other ethnic groups.
Russian author and Holocaust survivor Daniel Granin, who was transported to Auschwitz in 1944 after a Nazi siege, was invited to describe his memories of the horrific experience.
It took me a long time to forgive Germany. That's how horrendous a war is. It's stained with blood.
Many people toured the Auschwitz compound, including officials from the Israeli parliament, who visited the site to remember its liberation by Russian soldiers in 1945. Germany has since apologized for the suffering inflicted by its troops and said they feel for the survivors who are still dealing with the consequences of war. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Now, back here in this country, quarantine officials appear to be fighting a losing battle as they attempt to contain the spread of the bird flu. More and more suspected cases are popping up in areas that were previously unaffected by the virus. Kwon So-ah has the latest.
Despite mass sterilizations on the ground and in the skies, the culling of ducks and chickens in their hundreds of thousands, and movement bans on livestock and farm workers, more and more suspected bird flu cases are being reported throughout Korea. Another suspected case was reported Tuesday at a chicken farm in the city of Pyeongtaek in Korea's central Gyeonggi-do province. If confirmed, this would be the first case of bird flu at a farm in Gyeonggi-do province and the second case of chicken contamination in the country. A day before, ducks on a farm in Jincheon in Chungcheongbuk-do province were also suspected of carrying the virus. Investigations in both Pyeongtaek and Jincheon are underway, and the results on whether the highly pathogenic H5N8 virus has affected the farms is expected in the next few days. While confirmed or suspected flu cases have hit Jeollado, Chungcheongdo, as well as Gyeonggi-do provinces so far, officials in Gyeongsangnam-do in the southeast of the country say migratory bird droppings have tested positive for a flu virus, but further tests need to be done. The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs said that in past bird flu epidemics, the virus has often broke out in the West Coast regions and gradually spread inland. The government and the ruling Saenuri Party will hold an emergency meeting on this Tuesday to coordinate efforts to stem the spread of the virus over the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Now, the Korean government on this Tuesday issued special pardons for nearly 6,000 people who committed minor crimes in the course of trying to make a living. Justice Minister Hwang Kyo-an said that a total of 5,925 people were pardoned ahead of the Lunar New Year holiday, which starts Thursday. Now, in addition, about 2.9 million traffic violators will be exempted from their penalties. However, the list of beneficiaries will not include people caught driving under the influence. Prominent politicians, businessmen, and offenders of violent crimes will also be excluded from the list of those pardoned. The special pardons are the first since President Park Geun-hye took office last year. Korean presidents have traditionally issued pardons to commemorate major national holidays. Now, shifting our focus to the economy, the heavy sell-off in Korea and other emerging markets has sparked fresh concerns that we might be about to see a repeat of the massive currency sell-off that crippled Asian markets in the late 1990s. Our Yudian explains.
Emerging markets, once fragile and small, fell like dominoes 15 years ago from the Asian financial crisis. Times have changed since then, but the massive sell-off seen in recent days indicates those countries are just as vulnerable as they were back in the late 1990s. From relatively sound economies like Mexico to politically rocky Turkey, investor jitters about the prospects for emerging economies are spreading fast. And the massive sell-off could speed up to an unprecedented level, as the money that flowed into emerging markets in recent years dwarfs the sums that fled some 15 years ago. Huge amounts of cheap cash from the U.S. Federal Reserve's massive stimulus program have flowed into emerging markets in recent years, hunting for higher returns. Now that the Fed is poised to further scale back its stimulus, that flow is rapidly reversing. But unlike last year, this year's sell-off is being exacerbated by local factors.
The Turkish situation has nothing to do with South Africa. That has nothing to do with the Ukraine. That has nothing to do with the slowdown. Partially we're seeing in China, Thailand. But when you add them up, it looks like a crisis. Now, the problem with them being all very different is there's no single solution.
With concerns looming over a foreign exchange crisis in Argentina and the Turkish central bank's ability to keep interest rates low, emerging economies are bracing for even greater outflows in the coming days and weeks. Yudian, ARIRANG News.
Well, but for now, at least today, shares in Seoul seem to be faring well. The local stock market steadied early on Tuesday after sharp declines the previous 3 sessions, with investors staying cautious ahead of expected stimulus reduction by the U.S. Federal Reserve this week. Now, as of 1:30 p.m. Korea time, the benchmark Kospi was up 0.3%, trading at 1917. Now, the Kospi shed more than 3% in the past 3 sessions. The tech-heavy Kosdaq was also trading in positive territory by 0.2%, while on the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency was trading stronger against the greenback at roughly 1,078 won. And Korean exporters lost nearly 5% of their price competitiveness last year because of the appreciation of the country's currency. The Bank of Korea says the won's effective exchange rate index stood at 108.64 in December, up 4.8% from a year earlier. Now, the index indicating the price competitiveness of Korean products in export markets was at its highest level in 5.5 years. It measures the won's relative strength against a trade-weighted basket of currencies of Korea's trading partners.
All of the day's important events. Events close to home, around the world.
Second half last, figure out what winners.
The arts and culture scene and the heart of global business.
Experts added that
ARIRANG News has your whole day covered.
the legislature will convene a plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government.
Well, more and more people in Korea are falling ill with a severe bout of the flu, and I must include myself in that list as well. With young students heading back to school for the winter break, there are concerns the number of cases could skyrocket in the coming days. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Kim Seon-lang brought her 3-year-old son to the hospital after he showed no signs of improvement despite taking medication for over a week for what she thought was a common cold. Kim's son had a high fever reaching close to 40 degrees Celsius, coupled with severe coughing. The hospital confirmed he'd come down with pneumonia, a much more serious illness.
I was alarmed when the hospital said he had pneumonia.
Like Kim's son, the number of people showing symptoms of high fever, throat pains, and bodily fatigue are on the rise in Korea. Last week, around 30 people came down with a severe case of the flu, and a flu warning was issued last month over 3 strains, including the potentially deadly H1N1 virus.
What appears to be cold symptoms can lead to complications and turn into pneumonia and ear infections. There's also a condition called Reye's syndrome that could potentially harm the brain.
Local authorities say the number of cases is nothing to be worried about at the moment, but with children heading back to school after the winter break and millions of people planning to travel back to their hometowns for the Lunar New Year holidays, the number of cases could spike over the next few days and weeks. Experts say a patient suffering from a fever over 38 degrees Celsius should be taken to see a doctor, and the public should pay special attention to washing their hands thoroughly throughout the day. Meanwhile, health officials in the U.S. state of California say almost 150 people have died from the flu so far this month. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Turning now to the latest developments in Ukraine, the country's beleaguered President Viktor Yanukovych has agreed to scrap anti-protest legislation that set off a wave of violent clashes between protesters and police over the past week. Now, the repeal of that law was one of the opposition's main demands during talks Monday, but the president has shown no willingness to offer amnesty for arrested protesters unless protesters stop occupying buildings and end their mass demonstrations in central Kiev. Officials say the anti-protest law will likely be scrapped at a special parliament session on Tuesday. Now, it is not immediately clear how the announcement will be received by the protesters in Kiev, but it is likely to be seen as a small victory over the government going into the crunch parliamentary session. Now, with less than 5 months left before the World Cup in Brazil, protests against the tournaments have flared across that country, in some cases turning violent. FIFA has condemned the violence and is calling on Brazil to devise measures to ensure the safety of athletes, spectators, and Brazilian citizens. Kim Min-ji reports.
Mass protesters smashed shop windows in Sao Paulo while others set a passing car on fire. More than 2,000 people have taken to the streets since the weekend in major cities across Brazil to rally against the high cost of staging the World Cup. Waving flags and banners, the protesters shout, "There will be no cup." Violence broke out as police clashed with protesters who attacked cars and vandalized bikes. Police used tear gas guns to disperse the crowds and detain more than 100 demonstrators, while one protester was shot. The protesters are against the huge amount of money being spent on new stadiums and say the money should be used for public services.
It costs too much money. The money should be used to invest in better health and education services. We need to spend the money to improve the lives of the citizens.
The protest was planned by activist group Anonymous, which has been holding rallies across the nation since the Confederations Cup last June. Back then, about 1 million people took to the streets in cities across Brazil to speak out against government corruption and poor public services, while the nation spends billions on the World Cup. Meanwhile, Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff convened an emergency cabinet meeting to come up with countermeasures. FIFA says it respects people's right to protest peacefully, but has condemned the violence and called on the Brazilian government to take steps to ensure the safety of players and the spectators. The World Football's governing body has already warned Brazil to speed up its preparations for the tournament. The World Cup will kick off in Sao Paulo on June 12th. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And now it's time for our arts and culture segment with our Lee Tae-ho. And today, Tae-ho brings us highlights of the music industry's biggest night, the Grammys. Good afternoon to you, Tae-ho.
Good afternoon.
So the biggest music awards show of the year, the Grammys, was held yesterday. So I'm sure everyone is wondering who was there, who took home the prizes, and what performances were being held.
You know, those are all some fantastic questions. So today I bring with me a complete wrap-up of the awards ceremony, from who strutted their stuff on the red carpet to what all the big performances that everybody is talking about.
The biggest music award show of the year, the 56th Annual Grammy Awards, wrapped up yesterday at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. And the biggest stars in the industry came decked out for their red carpet moment. Some of the big names that were in attendance at the star-studded gala were singers Miley Cyrus and Robin Thicke, who did not perform together for the show, as well as the likes of Madonna and Ringo Starr. And of course, past award winners were in attendance as well, including rapper Nelly, who had this to say about the awards.
I think everyone would always like to win, but being nominated, I think, is a beautiful situation.
The big winners of the night, Daft Punk and Lorde, also strutted down the red carpet before accepting the evening's biggest honors. But perhaps legendary country music singer-songwriter Willie Nelson summed up best what the night means for many of the artists in attendance.
Well, it's good to hang out with the guys and get to see everybody, and fortunately these awards are a good way to get together.
The show kicked off with perhaps one of the most anticipated performances of the evening by the husband and wife duo of Jay-Z and Beyoncé, performing her latest hit, Drunk in Love. Rookie sensation Lorde was also on hand to perform her global hit Royals, and Robin Thicke performed his hit Blurred Lines with the band Chicago. One of the highlights of the evening was Daft Punk and Pharrell Williams performing a stunning rendition of Get Lucky with music legend Stevie Wonder. But the most anticipated performance of the night was by the two surviving members of the Beatles, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. All in all, the night featured 44 artists performing 30 songs in what was a riveting night of stars, songs, and awards.
Well, what can we say? Grammys are Grammys, and the biggest names, biggest stars were all there that night.
And I think that was the best part of the Grammys, seeing all the different stars together in one place, and in many cases performing together as well. So it was really a treat for all fans of music.
Right, and Tae-ho, I think you left out the best or the biggest part of the night.
That's right, I was saving the best for last, so I won't make anybody wait any longer. Let's go ahead and take a look at who the big winners of the evening were.
The two big winners of the evening were the French DJ duo Daft Punk and the teenage sensation hailing from New Zealand, Lorde. Daft Punk took home the double whammy of the evening, winning Best Album of the Year for Random Access Memories and Record of the Year for Get Lucky, featuring Pharrell Williams and Nile Rodgers. Lorde also scored a double whammy herself, taking home the Grammys for the Song of the Year and Best Pop Solo Performance for her debut hit, Royals.
Did not expect the most.
But she did miss out on the Best New Artist award, which was snatched by the hip-hop duo of Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. They swept the rap awards as well, taking home a grand total of 4 awards on the big night. Congratulations to all the big winners this year, and that wraps up the 56th Annual Grammy Awards for 2014.
Well, I'm sure it was a fantastic night for the viewers, as well as performers, and those who won the prize as well.
That's correct, but I mean, it's such a treat for us to see living legends in the music industry collaborating with some of the brightest and upcoming stars together on one stage, and especially performances like Daft Punk, who are the big winners, with Stevie Wonder, or even the Beatles reunion with Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. That was absolutely fantastic and something that I'll be remembering for a long time.
Right, definitely a rare treat for us to get a glimpse of the two surviving members of the Beatles, definitely. All right, Tae-ho, thank you so much for today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right.
And let's see what the weather has in store for us. Here now is a look at the weather conditions in your neck of the woods. And that's all for me at this hour. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll be back with more of the day's latest at 4 p.m. Korea time. See you then.